The moving truck hissed as its brakes engaged at the end of a sun-drenched cul-de-sac. John Carter stepped out, wiping sweat from his brow as he surveyed his new HOA clean. Two-story craftsman with a wraparound porch, nestled in the kind of neighborhood real estate agents called idyllic. To John, it just looked safe. Safe was all he wanted for Lily. He opened the passenger door gently, and his daughter peeked out. 12 years old, tiny for her age, with bright eyes and a soft, tired smile. Her wheelchair's wheels clicked softly on the ramp as he guided her down. "It's quiet," she said. "Quiet's good," John replied, squeezing her hand. "No more hospital sounds. Just birds and maybe a lawnmower." Lily laughed softly, her voice breathy from years of fragile lungs. John smiled, but his eyes stayed alert. He always scanned for things others didn't notice. A habit born from watching doctors miss things that nearly cost Lily her life. As he wheeled her up the driveway, he noticed a woman in a pastel twin set. Watching them from across the street, she stood stock straight, arms crossed, holding a clipboard. John nodded politely. She didn't wave back by the time they had most of the boxes inside. John was unpacking Lily's specialized cooler of pre-prepped medically approved meals, each one labeled and sealed. Lily's diet wasn't just strict, it was life-critical. The food had to stay cold, and it couldn't be contaminated. He placed the cooler on the shaded part of the porch, while he ran inside to grab her medication kit. He was gone for less than 10 minutes. When he came back, the cooler was gone. John stopped cold. He scanned the porch, the steps, the driveway. Nothing. "Lily, did you see anyone?" She shook her head. "No, just the lady from earlier." She was walking around with her clipboard. Flicker of dread tightened in John's gut. He moved fast, circling the side of the house. Then he spotted it jammed inside one of the trash bins. His cooler, open, the seal broken, contents dumped like trash. Meals exposed to heat, dirt, and flies. He stared, stunned. Then he saw the note stuck to the lid with clear tape. "No unsightly items allowed outside." HOA Regulation 14B. This is your first warning. John stared at the note, his jaw locked. A dozen responses flooded his mind, but he said nothing. Instead, he picked up the cooler with slow, deliberate care. Inside, some of the meals were leaking. A bottle had cracked. These meals weren't replaceable on a whim. Each batch was formulated with supplements and allergens strictly managed. Losing them meant risking Lily's health. Or worse, he felt the burn of anger rise, but he kept it buried. For now, he walked back up the porch and sat beside Lily. "We'll figure it out," he said quietly. Lily looked up at him. "Did someone throw it away?" He hesitated. "Yeah, I think so. Why?" He looked across the street. The woman with the clipboard was back, standing at the edge of her manicured lawn, staring. She didn't blink when John met her gaze. He gave her a slight nod. She didn't return it, because some people think the rules matter more than people, he said finally. But they're wrong. He smiled at Lily. They just don't know who we are yet. The next morning, the sun rose over Rose Willow Court, casting golden streaks across trimmed hedges and sparkling driveways. It was the kind of morning meant for peace. But in the Carter household, a silent storm was already brewing. John opened the fridge and stared at the empty shelf where Lily's week of prepped meals should have been. The contaminated ones from the cooler were gone, tossed, unrecoverable. Last night, he'd scraped together enough to feed her a safe dinner, but now the reserve was dry. He heard Lily coughing softly in the living room, the sound rasping through her chest like gravel. Her condition wasn't immediately life-threatening without the meals, but give it 48 hours of the wrong food, and the inflammation could spiral out of control. They'd spent years perfecting a nutritional plan that didn't just feed hurt, stabilized her, and some neighborhood busybody had thrown it away like trash. John packed a small breakfast of rice, cereal, and a carefully measured almond milk blend, safe but incomplete. "Okay, we'll get more today," he said gently as Lily picked at it. "I'll take a few hours off. Drive to that compounding center out in Westfield." Lily nodded, but her lips were pale, and she didn't finish her food. By 9 a.m., John had already called 2 dietitians and the pharmacy that compounded her nutrient formula. No same-day prep. They needed 48 hours at least. The hospital had a backup option, but it came with a hefty price tag and required reauthorization through insurance. He stood at the kitchen window, hands braced on the counter, staring blankly at the porch where the cooler had sat. The spot looked so innocent, clean, just part of a normal home. But someone in this neighborhood thought that little box, clearly labeled medical keep, cold, was an unsightly item. That's when he saw her again. Clipboard, twin set, and that same artificial smile curling at the corners of her mouth as she paced slowly past his house, peeking into his yard like a property inspector on a power trip. John opened the door before he knew he'd made the decision. "Excuse me?" he called. She turned, startled, then immediately replaced her expression with a Stepford smile. "Yes. Are you the one who left the note?" he asked, keeping his voice level. She blinked innocently. "Note?" He walked down the steps and held up a photo of it on his phone. "This one?" "Oh," she said lightly. Yes, I did. It's part of HOA policy. You really shouldn't leave items on your porch. It diminishes the neighborhood's presentation." John stared at her. It was a medical cooler.
Clearly
Labeled. It had refrigerated meals for my daughter. Key has a condition that requires, well, I didn't know that, she cut in. waving a dismissive hand. You're supposed to inform the board if you have special needs, so accommodations can be formally approved. He bit back the response building in his chest. You took it without asking. I disposed of it, she replied, voice sweet, but firm, as is my right under the HOA's charter. Section 12C. External property violations. First warning. Don't worry, no fine yet. She turned as if the matter were resolved. Don't touch anything on my property again, John said sharply. She paused, looked over her shoulder with narrowed eyes. Oh, John, if you wanted to be part of this community, maybe you should start by following the rules. Ah, he stared at her, expression unreadable. Noted. Ah. As she walked away, John's fingers closed around his phone. He opened a folder titled Credentials. A scan of his badge stared back at him. John Carter, Deputy Director, County Health and Regulatory Affairs. And for the first time that morning, he smiled. The neighborhood was eerily quiet the next afternoon. A gentle breeze rustled the American flags mounted above doorways. Lawns stood immaculate, flower beds blooming like postcards. But beneath the surface of Rose Willow Court, tension buzzed like an underground wire. John stood beside his daughter's bed, checking her vitals again. Lily had eaten only half her breakfast, what little of it he could safely cobble together. Her cheeks were pale. She'd said her stomach felt tight. That was her way of describing the warning signs. Her body wasn't just reacting to missing nutrients, it was protesting. He pulled the blinds shut, kissed her forehead, and slipped downstairs. He hadn't slept much. All night he'd been reviewing the HOA charter, the neighborhood bylaws, and the county ordinances. He was stunned not by how strict they were, but by how selectively enforced everything seemed. The rules Karen quoted with godlike authority were worded vaguely enough to mean anything or nothing at all, and then there was the trash bin itself. When he retrieved the discarded cooler yesterday, he noticed something odd. It wasn't even in the common use bin. Oh, it had been dumped into his properties, been technically off limits. To anyone but him, that was trespassing. Possibly even theft. He opened his laptop and began a new file. Rose Willow HOA Incident Log Unauthorized Disposal of Medical Property. 5/17 Potential ADA Violation. Failure to accommodate. HOA regulation inconsistencies under review. Suspected personal harassment. He paused, then added, individual of concern. Karen HOA President at 3:14 p.m. A doorbell rang. He opened it to find a smiling neighbor in workout clothes, holding a mason jar of something homemade. Welcome to Rose Willow, she chirped. Figured I'd drop off some of my famous sweet tea. Trish, 2 houses down. Thanks, John said, glancing at the label. HOA Welcome Committee. Sponsored by Karen E. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Trish shifted awkwardly. So, I heard about the little mix-up with the cooler. Mix-up? John asked, voice calm. She laughed nervously. Well, you know, Karen's super detail-oriented. She means well. Gets a little intense. Don't take it personal. Won't, John said flatly. Just curious. Have she ever thrown away anyone else's property? Trish hesitated. I mean, not exactly. But she has warned people about porch plants. And she once fined a guy for putting a Halloween skeleton out 2 days early. Sounds like a pattern, John murmured. Trish leaned in, lowering her voice. Listen, she's been HOA president for almost 8 years. No one runs against her. She kind of steamrolls everyone. Most people are too tired to fight. We just keep our heads down. John nodded slowly. Well, she said, stepping back, if you need anything, we're around. And if you ever get tired of sweet tea and strict bylaws, we've got a wine club that meets off the HOA record. As the door shut, John looked at the mason jar on the counter, then at the open file on his laptop. He wasn't tired, he was focused. Outside, Karen walked down the street again, clipboard in hand. Like a monarch surveying her territory, she stopped in front of his mailbox, pretended to check her watch, then jotted something down. Another violation, probably. John calmly lifted his phone and snapped a photo from inside the blinds. She didn't notice. He closed the curtain, sat back at his desk, and clicked open the official health department portal. It was time to start laying the groundwork. And Karen had no idea who she was picking a fight with. 2 days passed, and John didn't hear a word from Karen. No apology. No check-in. Not even a flimsy HOA notice acknowledging what she'd done. But that silence didn't fool him. It was the kind of quiet predators used to circle. John didn't wait. While Lily rested, he dug in deeper. Karen had been HOA president for 8 consecutive terms. No one else had ever run. Or, if they had, they'd quietly withdrawn. The bylaws allowed for emergency appointments and proxy voting. John noticed. Most board elections were conducted via mail-in ballot with zero transparency. But that wasn't all. During one of his late-night research dives, John found something buried in the community Facebook group. A post from 2 years ago. A parent complained that their kid developed a rash after swimming in the HOA community pool. When they raised concerns, the post was deleted, and the family soon moved out. Curious. John took a walk the next morning. The gates to the pool area were locked with a rusted latch. Signs were updated regularly, open seasonally, subject to HOA discretion, but no dates were posted. Through the bars, he saw algae scumming at the edges of the pool tiles. A broken light fixture floated in the deep end. He took out his phone, snapping high-res photos from different angles. Mold on the tile grout. unsecured chemical containers behind the maintenance shed. The pool hadn't just been neglected, had become a liability. He pulled up the county health code on his tablet. Multiple violations, easily documented. He didn't even need to use insider access. These were visible to any citizen willing to look. That same day, he took a stroll past the clubhouse. Karen had organized a monthly HOA luncheon, mandatory for board members, strongly encouraged for residents. Outside the back door, a buffet table had been set up. Food trays sat uncovered, warming in the afternoon sun. No refrigeration, no thermometers. And he looked closer, flies buzzing over a container of egg salad. He took a breath, snapped more photos. Then he spotted Karen standing by the drink station, refilling a glass from an open cooler, his old cooler. His fingers clenched. "Afternoon, John," she called with a plastic smile. "You're welcome to join us. We always try to build community here. It's part of what makes Rosewillow so exclusive." John approached slowly, glancing at the table. "Looks nice. Who's handling the food safety side of things?" She laughed as if he'd made a joke. "Oh, don't worry. My sister's a nurse. She says this stuff's fine as long as it doesn't sit too long." John gave a neutral nod. "Hope nobody gets sick." Karen's smile flickered. "We've never had a problem before." He looked her dead in the eye. "You will?" She blinked, startled. "Excuse me?" John let the silence hang just long enough to be uncomfortable, then turned and walked away. He didn't look back, but he knew she was watching him. That evening, back home, Lily was feeling a little better. John sat beside her while she sketched stick figures on her tablet, one of her favorite pastimes. "Did she say sorry yet?" Lily asked. "No," John said quietly. "But that's okay." He smiled. "Because I'm not waiting for her to apologize." He uploaded the photos and started drafting the complaint, not as a neighbor or a father, but as an officer of the law. The file was growing, the violations piling up like bricks. The house might be pretty on the outside, but behind the gates, decay, rotting rules, quiet abuses. And John was going to shine a light on every inch of it. Monday morning arrived cloaked in stillness, but for John, it was the calm before the strike. He brewed his coffee, dressed sharply, and placed a call not to the neighborhood board but directly to his department. "I'd like to request an anonymous field review," he told the internal complaint line. Location: Rosewillow Court, HOA, Community Pool and Clubhouse. Multiple Category B violations. Submit photographic evidence via secure portal. He gave them a burner email and hung up. A routine inspection would be scheduled in under 72 hours. No need for warrants. No need for permissions. Just protocol. It was time to watch Karen scramble. He sat down to prepare Lily's breakfast. Carefully measured and bland, but safe. She was improving slowly, still tired, but smiling more. That was enough for now. At 11 a.m., he walked past the HOA clubhouse again. This time, a man in a bright orange safety vest stood near the front steps. He was taking photos, clipboard in hand. John didn't wave or interfere. He just walked by slowly and smiled. Karen, on the other hand, came flying out of the building like a hornet, disturbed. Excuse me? Excuse me? This is private property. You need to county health inspection, ma'am, the man said calmly. We received a formal complaint. Based on the visible conditions, this is a valid inspection site under County Ordinance 12.9b. I wasn't notified. You don't have to be, he replied. That's how spot checks work. John could practically feel the heat radiating off her as he passed by at 2:30 p.m. Karen knocked on his door. He opened it slowly, arms crossed. Yes, she didn't smile this time. Her lips were pinched white. Did you file a complaint with the health department? Why would you think that? John asked mildly. Because we've never had a random inspection in this neighborhood. And then you just after you. If there's nothing to hide, John said smoothly, then there shouldn't be a problem. Karen leaned in, her tone low and hostile. You think you're clever, stirring up trouble. I could fine you for the crack in your front walkway, or the length of your grass. John's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you, she said through gritted teeth. This is a community with standards. People move here for peace, not drama. If you don't like how we do things, maybe this isn't the place for you. John let the silence stretch. Then he stepped forward, lowering his voice just enough. You know what your problem is, Karen. You confuse power with permission. You think running a neighborhood board gives you the right to harass disabled kids and throw away medical supplies. You think you're above the law. You're not. She took half a step back. Didn't know you didn't care. John cut in. Quar. And that's worse. She stared at him, trying to summon whatever haughty authority she usually wielded. But something in his gaze unnerved her. She couldn't read him, man, that scared her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam the door. He simply said, "Consider this your second warning." And then he closed it, leaving her on the porch. Flushed and furious. Inside, John sat beside Lily, who was sketching again. Was that the HOA lady? Yes. Yeah, he said with a smile. She's starting to learn something important. What's that? John leaned back. Never mess with someone who knows the rules better than you do. Karen didn't waste time licking her wounds. By the following morning, retaliation had already begun. John woke to find a bright yellow violation notice duct-taped to his mailbox. Infraction notice: grass exceeds 3 HOA standard. Correction required within 24 hours. 3 inches. He measured it himself. It was barely over 2 and a half. Petty. Next came a second note slipped under his door. Unauthorized modifications observed. Side. Yard planter appears non-conforming. The modification was a small herb garden Lily had planted in biodegradable pots as part of her therapy routine. It wasn't even permanent. John crumpled the paper and calmly opened his laptop. He'd seen this before. Classic abuse of HOA power. He knew the process, and he knew exactly how to document it. Every notice, every false claim, every vague accusation, he archived it all with timestamps and photographs. By noon, 3 more notices had arrived. Excessive use of property. Bins. Unapproved mailbox decor. Possible exterior lighting violation. The mailbox issue. Small rainbow butterfly sticker. Lily had added last week. It wasn't just harassment. Now was targeted. And Karen wasn't alone. Later that day, John caught 2 HOA volunteers, neighbors he hadn't even met, pacing along the side of his house with clipboards. When he stepped outside to confront them, they turned and walked off without a word, pretending not to hear him. That night, Lily was quiet. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. "No," John said gently. "We're not the ones doing anything wrong." But he could see the worry in her eyes. And that was the last straw. The next morning, he did 2 things. First, he formally invoked the ADA accommodation request clause under the Fair Housing Act, submitting it directly to the HOA's management company, not Karen. He requested that Lily's medical supplies be allowed outside in temperature-controlled containers, along with an exemption from related property codes. Second, he sent an official warning letter on county letterhead to the HOA board. This neighborhood is currently under observation by the Health and Regulatory Affairs Department for potential safety, accessibility, and civil rights violations. Any retaliatory action against the Carter residents will be documented and reviewed for legal escalation. He said the county commissioner's office and the legal compliance division within 12 hours. The violation notices stopped, but Karen wasn't done at 7 p.m. As the sun dipped behind the rows of perfectly spaced homes, John received a knock on the door. When he opened it, a tall man in a navy blazer introduced himself. "Frank Dalton, HOA Vice President." John nodded. "Let me guess, Karen sent you. She asked me to come smooth things over," Frank said carefully. "Said things may have gotten out of hand." John raised an eyebrow. "Out of hand is what happens when you break a lamp. What she did was malicious and illegal." Frank rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, between you and me, always been aggressive. People are just afraid to stand up to her. She's been president so long, it feels like she runs the place." "She doesn't," John said flatly. Not anymore. Frank exhaled. If it's any consolation, the board's reviewing her actions. Quietly, internally, she overstepped. Big time. John stared at him. You've all known this, and no one acted. Frank didn't answer. John nodded slowly. That's fine. I'll handle it. And he would, because what Karen didn't know was that the real storm hadn't even started yet. He was done warning her. He was about to end her reign. By the end of the week, Kieran's once flawless facade had begun to crack. It started with a quiet update on the community website. The Rosewillow HOA board is undergoing internal review. We thank residents for their patience. No names. Number. Explanations.
Okay.
The whispers spread fast. John didn't stop there. He submitted a formal grievance through the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, citing discriminatory enforcement practices, retaliation for disability accommodations, and failure to comply with reasonable medical allowances under the ADA. The documentation he provided, photos, timestamps, letters, and witness statements, was airtight within 48 hours. A federal ADA compliance officer reached out to him, and 72 hours after that, they reached out to the HOA. Karen had no idea what hit her. The next time John walked past the clubhouse, it wasn't a county inspector outside. It was a federal compliance team. Black slacks, blue jackets, clipboards. Karen was pacing inside, her usually perfect posture slumped. Her phone glued to her ear as she gestured wildly to someone on the other end. John didn't need to hear the words to know. She was panicking. That afternoon, residents received a shocking email blast, effective immediately. Karen Ellison has been placed on administrative leave, pending the outcome of a formal investigation. Vice President Frank Dalton will assume interim duties. Murmur spread through the neighborhood like a ripple in a still pond. People stepped out of their homes, chatting in driveways, glancing at one another with stunned expressions. Later that evening, Trish, the neighbor who'd first brought sweet tea, stopped by John's porch with a bottle of wine and a grateful smile. "I don't know how you did it," she said, "but thank you. You did what none of us could." John didn't gloat. He simply nodded. "I didn't do it for applause." Trish tilted her head. "No, but you did it right." Inside, Lily was coloring by the fireplace. She looked up as John entered and smiled sleepily. Did she get in trouble? Yes, John said softly. She did. Good, Lily said. She was mean. John sat beside her, brushing a hand through her hair. No one's going to mess with your food again, I promise. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A large white envelope arrived in the mailbox. Inside was a handwritten letter on thick embossed paper with the Rosewillow HOA seal. It was from Karen. Mr. Carter, I now understand that my actions though well-intentioned in my view, were misinformed and inappropriate. I deeply regret the distress I caused to you and your daughter. Please accept my formal apology. I will be stepping back from HOA duties indefinitely. Respectfully, Karen Ellison John. Read the letter twice. He didn't feel satisfied. He didn't feel angry either. What he felt was clarity. Karen hadn't learned because she wanted to. She learned because someone made her. And that someone was just a dad trying to protect his daughter. Later that day, Vice President Frank officially issued an apology to the entire neighborhood, opened an anonymous voting system for future HOA leadership, and introduced new transparency measures, including resident oversight, for the first time in years. Rose Willow felt like it belonged to everyone, not just a queen with a clipboard. And Karen, she'd gone silent. Her blinds stayed drawn. Her clipboard was nowhere in sight. The tyrant had fallen. The morning sun spilled gold across Rose Willow Court, painting long shadows from the freshly pruned hedges and polished mailboxes. The neighborhood seemed quieter now, not because of fear or tension, but because a long-held weight had been lifted. John stood on his porch, Lily in his arms, watching neighbors file past on their morning walks, chatting freely. The community felt different, lighter, more open, like a place reclaiming itself. The fallout from Karen's downfall had stirred waves far beyond the cul-de-sac. Within days, the county health department officially cleared the community pool and clubhouse. New maintenance protocols were established, along with routine safety inspections.
Okay.
The HOA's bylaws were rewritten to enforce transparency and prohibit any retaliation against residents. But John's work wasn't done yet. As the sun dipped low, he sat at his desk with a folder labeled Health Department. Records Rose Willow Court open before him. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Meet me at the park. 8 p.m., no cops. We need to talk. John frowned. Curious, cautious. He texted back. Who is this? No reply. That night, he went to the park. Shadows stretching long across the grass. A figure stepped from behind a tree. Small, deliberate steps. It was Karen. She looked tired, vulnerable. I didn't want to bother you before, she said quietly. I needed time. John nodded, arms folded. You wanted to say something? Karen took a deep breath. I was wrong, she admitted. About everything. I thought I was protecting this neighborhood, but I was just protecting my power. She paused, eyes fixed on the ground. I'm sorry for what I did to you and Lily. No excuse. John listened, silent. Then she surprised him. I've started therapy, she said. Learning how to be better, not just for the HOA, but as a person. He studied her. This wasn't the Karen he'd known, the queen of rules and retribution. but someone ready to change. Thank you. John said finally. Karen looked up, eyes a bit moist. Thank you for fighting. For standing up. For showing me what fairness really means. They parted with a nod. No grand reconciliation. No promises. Just a quiet understanding. As John walked home, Lily sleeping in his arms. He thought about the journey, the fights, the setbacks, the victories. Rose Willow Court was no longer a place ruled by fear. It was a place where even the hardest lessons could be learned. A place where a dad's love for his daughter had rewritten the rules. A place where justice wasn't just a word, it was a home.